Hi and welcome to Muggun Media. In this video, as a part B to our previous video, we're going to be showing you how to quickly and accurately measure the size of image of the screen of the back of your camera in order to create these templates for aspect ratio. So for this, you're going to need a ruler and you're going to need your camera, the camera that you want the aspect ratios for. Okay, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to take a photo of something bright. Doesn't matter what it is, so long as it's not in focus and that it's bright. So here we have a white wall, so I'm just going to take a photo of the white wall. Okay, perfect. So now we've taken our image, we're now going to have to cycle through the back of the camera until we get to the image on its own, as big as it will be. Then we take our ruler and we measure the length and then the height, like so. At this point in the video, you could either leave those dimensions with your camera make and model in the comments box below and we will create a template for you, or you can carry on and we will explain how you can create your own template at home. There's maths involved. Still with us? Okay, so let's first define what an aspect ratio is. And an aspect ratio is the ratio of the width of an image to the height of your image. So it isn't the camera screen, it's the image that your camera is taking. So to give an example of an aspect ratio of 3:2, this means that the width of your image is 1.5 times wider than it is tall. To give a few more examples of what aspect ratios look like, on the left here we have a 16:9 aspect ratio, and that means that the image is 1.78 times wider than it is tall. And on the right we have a 5:4 ratio, which means that it was 1.25 wider than it is tall. So this is a visual representation of how those same aspect ratios fit inside a 3:2 aspect ratio. So as you can see on the left, the 16:9 is wider than it is tall, and on the right, the 5:4 aspect ratio is squarer. So we're going to take a real life example. The Nikon D7-100's camera's measurements of width and height, and we're going to walk you through how we create the measurements for desired aspect ratios, and the examples we're going to use here are the same two aspect ratios that we've been using in the previous examples, the 16:9 ratio and the 5:4 ratio. So the first step is to calculate your camera's native aspect ratio using the measurements from the camera's image width and height. And you take the measurements and you divide one by the other, and here you can see that this camera has 1.5, which is an aspect ratio of 3:2. So the next step is to find out whether or not the desired aspect ratio is either wider or squarer than the native camera aspect ratio. And we do that in a similar calculation method as our previous examples. So on the left here we have a 16:9 aspect ratio, and you divide 16 by 9. The result is 1.78, which is greater than the camera's native aspect ratio of 1.5, so it's wider. And on the right, the example of 5:4 aspect ratio gives you 1.25, which means that it's squarer than the native 1.5 dimension from your camera. So the outcome of these equations will then determine how you proceed. If your desired aspect ratio is wider than your camera's native aspect ratio, you will proceed with the math example on the left. However, Should your desired aspect ratio be squarer than your camera's native aspect ratio, you will proceed with the math formula on the right. So let's go through these equations. So for a wider aspect ratio than your camera's native ratio, we calculate, using the example on the left, the new mat width will remain the same width as your original measurement, and to calculate the new mat height, you would take your original width measurement and you would times it by the inverse of your desired aspect ratio. So using the example that we'd previously been using of the Nikon D7-100, that would be the original width, 6.4, times by the inverse of the desired aspect ratio of 16:9, so that's 9 divided by 16, leaving us with the final mat height of 3.6 centimeters. If, on the other hand, your desired aspect ratio is squarer than your camera's native aspect ratio, we follow the formula on the right, and that is to take the new mat height as your original measurement for the height, and then to calculate your mat width, you take your original camera height and you multiply it by the straight aspect ratio, the desired aspect ratio. On this example, we're using 5:4. So to work through that example using the measurements as we have been doing for the D7-100, you would take the height, the original height of 4.3, and you would multiply that by 5/4, which is your desired aspect ratio, giving you a final mat height of 5.1 centimeters. So then we have on the left here the final dimensions for an aspect ratio, a desired aspect ratio of 16:9, and on the right we have the final dimensions for the desired aspect ratio of 5:4 for this particular camera. So I hope that made sense to you, but if it didn't, don't worry, we actually have a Google spreadsheet for you to enter in your measurements and get the aspect ratio measurements that you need to create your own template. Or, as we said before, leave us in the comments your measurements, camera, make and model, and we will create a template for you. We hope that you liked and found this video to be informative. If you did, please click the like button in the box below and click the subscribe button to our channel so that all new videos come directly to you. And as always, we love hearing from you, your thoughts and comments in the box below.